Hey there, welcome to the Fantasy Football Game Plan. We are going to do a rundown of the Week 10 DraftKings main slate. We're going to answer your questions. Is weather going to be a factor this weekend? I saw some snowflakes on some of the forecasts this weekend for the first time. So, will weather be a factor on any of these games? Are the injuries going to limit scoring? And where can we find value with those injuries? Hit subscribe, drop us a comment with your favorite plays of the week. Hey, are you getting offers from DraftKings to get a free token to have a no sweat lineup this week?
Yeah, so they're having a promotion for a couple of your lineups, just $3 or less, but still nice, especially if you want to play those showdowns. I don't play too many showdowns, so I might be interested in those. We got some fun primetime games this week, but it seems like they are paying a little bit more attention to their DFS community.
Yeah, I think they're trying to get some market share back there that maybe they lost. So they're bringing over some of the things that we often see on the sports book into like the tokens into their fantasy sports market. So let's get started. This week on bye, we've got Cincinnati, Dallas, Kansas City, and Tennessee all taking the week off. Our Sunday night matchup are the Steelers at the Chargers, and Monday night we've got the Eagles at the Packers. Sunday morning, we've got one of those Sunday morning games. They're in Berlin this week. We've got the Falcons at the Colts, which will be very exciting, but all of those games are off of the main slate. We've only got 10 games this week.
Yeah, and looking at the teams missing, I kind of feel better about the slate. We can't just pick on Cincinnati or Dallas. I feel like that's just who you stack is just whoever is playing them, but they are off the slate. We also are missing two of the teams that we're kind of biased for or against depending on the week with the Colts and Falcons. I think we should be able to get a good read on this slate. I'm excited to talk it through.
Yeah, last week was a little bit rough with all the very late injury news coming in the week with DeAndre Swift going out and leaving everyone on Kyle Monangai. He was chalk and he delivered in that game if you had him. So this week we're going to need to identify those hot spots for the injury, and we have lots of players returning in week 10 and teams coming off bye. We get Bucky Irving back this week, so we'll be addressing him in that game. But let's jump into it. So our first game on the slate is Buffalo Bills at the Miami Dolphins. Buffalo's favored by 9.5, and the over/under is 50. How you feeling?
Well, first in the slate, it does seem a little lower scoring. This is the only 50-point game of the week, and it doesn't really feel competitive here. I kind of like the Bills to run away with this. Miami was trading away some players at the trade deadline, and Buffalo is 9.5-point favorites here. So my gut reaction just tells me that it's James Cook and get out. We'll see if we can find some other receiving options here.
Yeah, I my gut reaction is the same, but then I back off of it a little bit, and Buffalo's coming off that huge win over Kansas City. So they got to be flying high a little bit. And maybe this one's a little bit of a letdown. And then the Dolphins are coming off that horrible loss to the Ravens last week where they only managed to score 6 points. Achan didn't even get in the end zone last weekend. That's how bad it was. But let's go through these quarterbacks. Any interest in Josh Allen or Tua?
Not here in this spot. I just think 7K for Josh Allen is a little too much in a game that I don't think he's going to be pushed. I really want Allen in those spots where I think the other team can keep up. And also, I'm just completely off Tua this year.
Yeah, he has looked so bad that I can't start him either. He is under 5K. He will be throwing it. Maybe he gets to 20 points, maybe even gets to 25 points if the Bills fall apart. But they looked really good last week, kind of to my surprise against the Kansas City Chiefs. So I'm going to pass on both of them. Let's move on to everybody else. I do like Achan here. I don't know how you keep somebody as talented as Devon Achan out of the end zone 2 weekends in a row. So I do like the Achan play. He's still at 7,400, but I just feel like you're getting so much value and he can easily score 30 points.
Yeah, both of these running backs have looked incredibly talented on the season, and Achan feels like the main engine for the Miami offense. And whether it's the passing game or the running a game, you're getting him in both. And also, just in that matchup against the Ravens last Thursday, the the Dolphins didn't look as bad as the score. They were having some success, but when it just came down to those key situational plays like the fourth downs, they just weren't having anything going their way. And so they had a couple bad bounces, which really made it seem like a blowout. But watching that game, especially in the first half, it felt like it should have been like more of a tied game. And just they didn't capitalize on a couple of key opportunities. But they were moving the ball with Waddle and Achane, just nowhere near the red zone.
Yeah, they just weren't getting in the end zone. And I think maybe that changes a little bit this weekend. If this game wasn't again in Miami, I don't think I wouldn't be doing this. But it's in Miami. The weather's going to be fine. So Ollie Gordon's also out, the other running back for Miami Dolphins. We had seen Ollie Gordon kind of taking a step forward in the previous weeks. And then last weekend, last Thursday, he got hurt with an ankle injury and left the game early. I don't think we probably see him this week. And with him out, and it's hard to like even just limit your view of Achan as a running back because he catches so many passes.
Yeah. The other targets there too, so it's like you have Waddle. I'm not crazy interested about Waddle in this week, especially he got his price raised another 500. The other pass catcher that I'll kind of bring up from Miami is Greg Dulcich as just a true pump play at tight end. He's down there at 2,600, and he was a talented prospect back when he was drafted by the Broncos, but he's kind of bounced around the league. But he had 5 catches, 5 targets last Thursday, and as long as Waller is on IR, I think at
Yeah.
2,600, you're not asking him to do much.
Yeah, you're not. I love that call for Dolchik. I can't say his name again. Anyhow, yeah, I love that call at tight end. 2,600, he is a bargain. How about Dalton Kincaid, who got it rolling last week? He's priced up to there at 4,300. Do you see the Bills needing him as much as they did last week?
I think he's a good play, and he's kind of a good alternative to McBride. He does seem to have established himself as kind of the number one option for when the Bills are just kind of rolling on offense and in their neutral game script, where we wanted one of the wide receivers to step up, and maybe it's just their tight end is their best player and the person that Allen trusts the most. I think Kincaid at 4,300, he's probably not going to do anything crazy, but I mean, last week he delivered 25 points. So I think that's kind of his true ceiling. We got the 100-yard bonus and we got the touchdown, so I'm not really expecting him to repeat that, but he can easily give you like 15.
Yeah, and I guess if there's ever a week to go to some of these Bills wide receivers like Shakir, this might be it. I just don't know if they're going to be pushed to do a whole lot. Josh Allen isn't going to be pushed to cover his 7,000, but maybe Shakir at 5,100 can be. He took another price hit, and we keep waiting for that big game from one of these wide receivers, and it hasn't happened yet, but this could definitely be it. So they're not eliminated from my list. I don't think they're a bad play.
Yeah, especially with Shakir's after the catch ability. And that's where Miami's kind of struggled is just wrapping up, and they have a lot of missed tackles on the season. So Shakir does kind of stand out as if you're going to try to shoot your shot with one of the wide receivers, that's who I'd take.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Los Angeles Rams at the San Francisco 49ers. The Rams are favored by 3.5. Over under is 49.5. This is a huge division game here. This conference has the Rams and the Seahawks tied at 6-2, and the 49ers sitting there at 6-3. They've played that extra game. Do we see Brock Purdy finally return? I kind of thought we were going to see him last week. We didn't get him back last week. Does he get back this week?
Shanahan's comments do not indicate that he's anywhere close. So that's what he said directly after the game was Purdy was not even close to playing in that last matchup. So I don't think we see him here. I think we get another Mac Jones game. And it is interesting. I mean, Mac Jones torched these same Rams just a couple weeks ago, back when they didn't think they had a shot and they didn't have even any of their wide receiver options either. So I feel like Shanahan does kind of own this matchup between the Rams and McVay. I don't think I want either quarterback here, though.
I don't want either quarterback either. We did see Matthew Stafford toss 4 touchdowns last week in the win over New Orleans, and then his price got raised to 6,500. But at 6,500, those 4 touchdowns didn't really, that's barely, it's not even covering 4 times his salary, really. It's barely covering his cost. And I don't expect him to pass for 4 touchdowns again this week. It could happen, but I see this as more of a defensive game, a defensive showdown for both of these teams. So going on the quarterbacks, we're out on both of them. Is that the case here?
Yeah, I'm
Purdy
out on
or
both of
Mac
them.
Jones?
Mac Jones has been starting long enough. He's still 5K, and with no rushing upside, I'm not liking the matchup here.
I'm not either. I do find it very interesting that, Brock Purdy basically has the same injury as Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow went and had surgery, and now Brock Purdy's just waiting to see if it heals.
Does seem like they've kind of mismanaged this whole situation where he was out for a week, then he came back, and then it seems that injury got much worse. And then they didn't put him on IR, but now this is going to be the 4th week in a row he's missed. So
Yeah.
this injury is kind of catching them a little off guard, and I think they're definitely kicking themselves for how they've treated it.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to everybody else on these teams. Is there any piece that you have to have?
So I think the main discussion is just those true top ends. We get the elite priced options here of Chris McCaffrey at 9K and Puka Nacua at 8.7. I don't think there's any. I mean, there's ways if you like punt everywhere else to get those two together and have them correlated. But really, I'm picking one or two, and I've kind of been going exclusively Puka here. I just don't think Chris McCaffrey. He's had a couple spike games in the past couple weeks, but I really like Puka here when they should be pushed.
The last time in week 5 when these two teams played, the 49ers gave up 32 points to Kyron Williams and 24.5 points to Puka. My worry with Puka is that he goes out again in the third quarter, especially if they happen to be up or if he gets hit again, then he's out. But since week 5, the 49ers defense has been really strong. The most they've given up to anyone was 21 fantasy points, and that was to Bijan Robinson. So that's, keeping Bijan pretty low. I'm not loving anyone here. The 49ers in week 5 were also missing Pearsall and Jennings and Kittle. And now they get at least Jennings and Kittle are already back. Maybe we see Pearsall return. I don't think we're going to get him back. I think we're going to go another week, but we might get him back. They're getting their weapons back, and they're spreading it around. In week 5, when Kittle was out, Jake Tongas had 11 targets and had a very big week for the 49ers. But I just don't see that in this game. I see it being spread around, or it's going to be extremely a good defensive matchup.
Yeah, I think the main plays I've had from this game is Puka with Juwan Jennings. I just kind of like that mini correlation play. And Juwan Jennings does seem to be healthy finally. He's had 4 catches at least in the past 3 games. So that's nice that he kind of has that rapport with Mac Jones. He's also not that expensive. He's about 4,600. And then Puka, we know his true ceiling. McVay said that he could have came back in the game, but it was just against New Orleans. So I think if this game is competitive, and I think the 49ers will keep up. Shanahan always gets the team in a position to play and win games they shouldn't. So I think this should be a game Puka will be playing all 4 quarters, and we can see that ceiling outcome.
Yeah, we're going to have to at 8,700. But in his limited use last week, before he went out, he saw 8 targets and had 7 catches for 95 yards and a touchdown. And he only played basically a half a game.
Yeah.
It's hard not to have Puka.
It is, especially in this slate in general. There's not too many of the elite wide receivers. We don't have the CD, we don't have Jamar Chase or T. Higgins. So there are very few wide receivers that can even give you that amount of points regardless of cost.
That's very true. And I did find myself when building lineups that I have a long list of running backs that I love this week. My flex position is always a running back because I have so many running backs that I love, but I don't have a lot of wide receivers that I love. And I do think there are a lot of them outside of Puka are going to be more priced in that 4,500 to 5,500 range.
Yeah.
Let's move on to Detroit at Washington. Detroit's favored by 8.5, and the over-under is 49.5. There's not much left of the Commanders.
No.
How are they?
They got decimated last Monday, and that was a gruesome injury for Daniels. So
yeah, they lost Jaden Daniels, they lost Marshawn Lattimore, and they lost Luke McCaffrey. So we get Marcus Mariota and Jared Goff.
We
Any
do.
interest in either of them?
I'm honestly very interested on the Detroit side of the ball. Really, I think this is going to be, I think it could be like a 20-point game because the Commanders just are not the Commanders that we think about and what might be baked into their perception. But this is also the team that bounced the number one seed Detroit Lions in the playoffs last year. And if we know anything about Dan Campbell, he is the ultimate motivator. He has his guys ready to play. And they've probably been watching film on that game all week long. They're hyper aware that this team knocked them out and upset them last time. It's not Jaden Daniels, which makes it a little less exciting. But
Yeah.
still, I think they're going to take out some of their anger from last year out on the what's left of the Commanders. They're at least wearing the same colors as last year. So I think they're going to be pretty fired up here. And especially after last week, where they kind of got shut down by a division opponent, it's like, all right, let's get some demons out and let's put up 40 on the Commanders.
Yeah, I don't know how this is getting to almost 50 points. This line is puzzling to me. Even, Detroit only being favored by 8.5. I feel like this should be in the double digits already because this definitely seems like a lopsided, very injured Commanders team. But I guess we're going to see what Dan Quinn and Cliff Kingsbury can dream up to beat the Lions. And I was super surprised in that Lions game last week against the Vikings how well the Vikings looked and actually had offense. And then, the Lions couldn't get Gibbs in the end zone. They couldn't get him going. Gibbs had 25 rushing yards last week on 9 carries.
Yeah, that was
That's
incredibly
crazy.
frustrating.
It was because I had him everywhere. So we're out on both Marcus Mariota and Jared Goff. Mariota is only 5,300. He comes with a little rushing upside, but I don't see it. And then Jared Goff is too expensive, um, and just isn't going to have 4 touchdowns. But so let's move on to all the other pieces. I'm going back to Gibbs here again, just like Achan. We had a week where we saw no touchdowns by Achan or Gibbs. I'm going back to both of them.
Yeah, I love it here. I think we always kind of get that where we're just a week early, and that feels like Gibbs here, where we know his talent. This is a great spot for him, and they should just be able to do whatever they want against the Commanders. So I think he can truly explode and kind of have that 100-yard game on the ground, plus he's getting another 30 in the air and maybe multiple touchdowns.
Yeah, I think so. I think they really try to get the offense going this week and feeling better after that loss last week and kind of to offset, like you mentioned last year, too. We did see them get Jamison Williams involved more last week, like they promised. He had 4 catches on 6 targets for 65 yards and got in the end zone at 4,600. No, he's 4,900. At 4,900, he's a bargain in this position as well. I think they'll spread the ball around. We know they love to do that. We'll see Amon-Ra, but I don't think we'll see Amon-Ra with 13 targets like we did last week because I don't think this is a competitive game.
I don't think it is either. Something to know about just how the Commanders play is they play are very man heavy, and that leads those big open shots and those big chunk plays available as long as the other team can take the opportunity. But we'll see if that continues. Losing Marshawn Lattimore, they might kind of switch that up and just try to protect themselves a little bit more with more zone. But if they do continue to play man, then Amos, their like talented rookie cornerback, will probably be seeing a lot of Amon-Ra St. Brown and free up Jamison Williams.
Yeah, it's interesting. Anyone on the Commanders that's left that you like?
I think the only one that truly feels playable here is Debo. Debo's sitting there at 5,600. And we know they're just going to spam the short yardage targets, and you're hoping he just falls in the end zone. He gets 8 catches, and that's his day. I don't think
Yeah,
you're going to have an explosive day, but with PPR and a touchdown, he can get there.
he could get there. I also would toss in Zach Ertz. I have a little bit of interest in him. I just have other tight ends on the slate that I like better than Zach Ertz in this game because I think the Detroit defense tries to shut down this team.
I think we're both off Laporta this week, right? He had a monster game last week, but I don't think he'll repeat that here.
I don't think so either. Last week was a difficult game. They were going a little bit shorter and they were going to Laporta and he was getting open. But I don't think they need to do that this week. All
So
right, let's go on to my favorite game, the New England Patriots at the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tampa Bay is favored by 2.5, over unders 48. This is the game that I love, but I get kind of excited about the Buccaneers because they like to put points on the board.
they do, and we have them off the bye here. So hopefully they're a little healthier. They are. I'm still going to be keeping an eye on their practice report because they were really banged up going into that bye week. So it'll be interesting on who they get back. Do they get Godwin back? Is Bucky 100% here in this matchup?
Yeah, exactly. How much do they unleash Bucky Irving is my big question. I think we will get both Bucky and Godwin back this week, but how much do they use them and do they overuse them or do we see more of a share between Rashad White and Bucky Irving? Let's start with the quarterbacks though. Drake May, Baker Mayfield. Drake May got it done last week, got the game won, but he didn't hit the fantasy numbers that we're used to out of Drake May so far this season. Because of that, I want to go back to him this week. I think he's going to have to be throwing this ball a lot in this game. Against the Falcons last week, he had moments and they struggled a little bit. They still got it done, but at 6,400 and he rushes, he had 8 rushing attempts last week. I think this is a great matchup for him.
Yeah, and the Falcons are currently still the number one pass defense right now, or points allowed to cornerbacks. So him getting to 18, it felt like even in the first half he was going to have a lot more than that. I think that kind of is his new floor from what we've seen from him this season. So he is a go-to play. He's not being priced like it too. Like they have not given him the Jane Daniels or Lamar Jackson or Jalen Hurts. He's not quite that tier, and so he's in a much more comfortable price than those other.
Yeah. I also don't mind the Baker Mayfield play. He's at 6,200. He also has that ability to scramble and take off on you. So I like both of these quarterbacks to be able to hit in this game. Baker's got more weapons, I feel like, than Drake May does. So I feel like they may get that lead and they're at home and then they aren't encouraged to pass the ball as much. But this could just be a back and forth game and a lot of fun.
Also, these defenses are very talented. That's kind of where I'm at. I'm like, I can see the shootout potential in this because just May and Baker, we know that regardless of the defense they're playing, they can get it done and find ways. But both of these teams are top 10 in EPA allowed. They're both really good defenses and have kind of, especially with Gonzalez, the Patriots have looked a lot better the past couple weeks.
They have. I still think the offenses look better. The Patriots are banged up. They're probably missing Ramondre Stevenson again this week with a toe injury. He may be back, but he missed practice already on Wednesday, so he's not starting the week off well. And then Kayshon Boutte left last week's game, unfortunately, with a hamstring injury, so he's almost sure to be out. So that leaves us Stephon Diggs. I know you were on Diggs a little bit last week, I think, and he did have a touchdown, but he didn't have a big game. We're gonna have to have somebody step up for the Patriots and have that big game here. We did see Demario Douglas do it last week, and he's only at 4,000 again this week. So I do like going back to him. Anyone that you like, we saw Terrell Jennings be the running back. They're not going to give it all to Travion Henderson, no
Yeah, I
matter
think
what we all want.
you have to focus on the pass catchers here because even if Ramondre is out, they're going to use a committee. It's going to be both Jennings and Henderson, and neither of them have shown enough that they can get it done with a limited workload. So I'm looking at the pass catchers here. The Bucks in the past have allowed those big chunk plays, and really, when I think of Drake May and who he has the best connection with down the field, and that's Kayshon Boutte.
Mhm.
So I think he's the best play here. He didn't have a good week last week, but
He's
we know
out.
on any given week. Oh, he's out still?
Yeah, Kayshawn Booty.
Yeah.
Yeah, no booty this week.
Oh, then I'm kind
Yeah,
of I think that just kind of sells the case that I mean Diggs could get it done, but really the other matchup there would be Hunter Henry and just say they're working the intermediate, but I think it does limit the ceiling on this game.
I still like Demario Douglas. I'm gonna go Douglas, but How about on the Bucs side? They're coming off of the bye. They're getting Bucky back and Godwin back. I think Godwin will be limited. He has 5,500. I think he's going to be too limited probably to pay off that salary. Can Emeka Ibuka do it against the Pats defense?
I'm on the no side just because I don't think he has a good matchup here. Against zone coverage, he has a 70% catch rate and he averages 2.44 yards per route run. Against man coverage, that drops to a 31% catch rate and 0.95 yards per route run. So if we just think the a route for Ibuka against zone versus man is about 1.5 times or 2.5 times as valuable for him. And Patriots have shifted towards more man, especially with Gonzalez back. They're really good at man. They're really good just in pass coverage overall. So I do not like Ibuka here at this matchup. He's not that cheap either at
He's not.
7K.
I'm still going to go with him.
He's gotten it done. He's proved me
gotten
wrong
it
plenty
done.
times.
Yeah, this might come down to this is a lineup I want to root for because I got a lot of lineups this week that I'm like, this just stinks rooting for these players and I don't like it.
I think Bucky is an interesting pivot here. And even though New England's been shutting down running backs on the ground, he's just so active in the pass catching role that if he's that lead back, he can get those short yardage targets and have a great game.
He definitely could. And I may be regretting not getting Bucky Irving into my lineup because I didn't. Let's move on to the New York Giants at the Chicago Bears. Chicago's favored by 3.5. Over-under's 48.5. Chicago almost scored 48.5 by themselves last week.
They did, without Rome Odunze, too.
Both of these quarterbacks, I have to admit, are interesting because they're coming off big games. I kind of like the traditional setup that we look for in DFS here with, a home running back. And we just have that question, are the Bears going to have to put up those 47 points again? I think DeAndre Swift is out again. Anyhow, do you like either Caleb Williams or Jackson Dart this week?
Honestly, I like both of them. I can make a case for either of them. I've been leaning towards Jackson Dart just because he's a little cheaper and I think he runs it a bit more. And the running game is typically very effective against Chicago. So I think he kind of might be that back, and if we just think about him more of a running back and sharing carries with Tyron Tracy with Scatabo gone, I am leaning towards Jackson Dart here. But I can make a case for Caleb and just saying that Tyron Tracy is kind of the other side.
I don't see the Bears scoring 47 points again this week, so I'm going to be out on Caleb Williams, and Jackson Dart. I
He's
think
gotten
without
it done.
Scatterbo, he has gotten it done. I don't mind him. He's a good play.
The other thing I'll say with Jackson Dart is if his wide receivers could actually catch the ball, they have dropped so many touchdowns for Jackson Dart, and they are not helping him out. If they can just come down with a couple of those in this game, then I think it makes his performance a little bit more sustainable.
Yeah, that's true. Let's move on to everybody else. Everybody except you and I think we're all on Kyle Monangai last week, and we were determined not to have the chalk. Is he going to be the chalk again this week? Last week he had 176 yards and 3 catches, but didn't get in the end zone.
Yeah, and he looked great. He was very successful. We know the running back from Ben Johnson is very valuable. Just that running scheme is really good. And the Bengals were a great matchup. The Giants are also a great matchup against running backs. So if it all kind of comes down to the Swift injury and following that, if he's actually rolled out again, then yeah, Monangai is great here, especially if he's not the new fad and he's $1,000 more expensive. So maybe everyone's off of him or most people are off of him. I think he's a great spot to just go right back to.
I think he's a great spot. The Giants have given up consecutive big weeks to McCaffrey and Barkley, both over 35 points. So, I like going right back to him here.
Yeah. Also, the other benefit of the Chicago injuries was Loveland. I was a little off him because Kmet was back in the lineup. And so then I pivoted away from him in all my lineups. And then Kmet went out early with a concussion and he crushed and he looked great. I think even if Kmet does end up playing, he has kind of cemented himself as that top tight end option there, and they're going to keep looking to him. I'm also interested in going back to Rome. Are you gonna trust Rome this week. He's had some bad weeks in the
Yeah.
uh,
I'm gonna
past four.
as long as I'm seeing so much work for Loveland, I'm going in such a good running matchup. I'm gonna stay away from Romo Dunze.
Yeah.
I feel like they'd rather go to Loveland and Mononga than Odunze or DJ Moore.
The point in favor of Rome is just the matchup of the Giants average the third highest man rate, and Rome has been about 60% better man versus zone. So he does kind of excel in those coverages. I'm interested. We know Dan Campbell's a very like players coach, and if a player's like due and wasn't involved the last week, we expect him to go back. I'm kind of curious if Ben Johnson follows that of he hears what outside noise are saying and that Rome's a little frustrated, and if he tries to get him worked back in.
I think that only happens once you're winning. So he's
Yeah,
got to get winning, which he's starting to do. The Bears are 5-3. They're having a decent season. They're starting to win, but until you establish that you're a winner, spreading the ball around doesn't work quite as well.
that is very true.
This game does offer value pieces for sure. We already talked about Manungai being only 5,600, even with that price bump. I'm pretty sure we're not going to see Swift or Komet playing this week. So Loveland at 4,100 is also kind of a bargain tight end. DJ Moore, you can't rule him out at 5,500. And Zacchaeus, 3,600. He had 8 targets last week.
He did.
So then you have your pick of the Giants wide receivers. Wan'Dale Robinson, 5,300 on 11 targets. Theo Johnson, their tight end, 3,800. And Darius Slayton, 4,300. This game definitely sets up to have all these inexpensive pieces that you can plug in and save money.
Yeah, I think my favorite, if I had to kind of order them, would be Slayton and Zacchaeus, just because Slayton, we know he's kind of that deep threat receiver, and he hasn't connected on those yet. So he's getting 7 targets. If you're getting those high targets and you can actually just connect on one of those deep bombs, and Chicago's the defense to do it against. We just watch the Bengals wide receivers do whatever they want. So I think I am liking the value of Slayton here at 4,300. If you want the safer option, look more towards Zacchaeus or Robinson if you're playing in like a small field tournament.
Sure. I'm going to pass on the Giants running backs, Tracy and Singletary. They're both priced, kind of up there a little bit, 4,300 and 5,800, and they're just sharing in that backfield. Let's move on to the Baltimore Ravens at the Minnesota Vikings. Baltimore's favored by 4, 48-point over under. Baltimore favored by 4 in Minnesota, and Minnesota just beat the Lions. How did that work?
Yeah, there's a lot of confidence on this Baltimore team still. And everyone is kind of, that flash from Men in Black of the first like 4 weeks, and we're like, yeah, we know what Baltimore is. We know they're a good team. So I think they're kind of getting the benefit of the doubt that they fixed it over the bye week. Their defense has looked better in the past couple weeks. I mean, only 6 points to Miami was a really strong showing. So that's kind of what this betting line tells me, is that Vegas is very confident in the Ravens, that they're bouncing back. But it is a little disrespectful to Minnesota off a great win against Detroit.
Yeah, I think they use that as motivation. I just feel like there have been way too many injuries on both of these teams to have a good feel for what we're going to get from either of them. And because of that, I'm just not going, yeah, I'm jumping on the Lamar bandwagon this year. I'm kind of staying away from from this game because I have no idea what we're going to get both offensively and defensively because of all of the injuries that we've had all year. Lamar Jackson, JJ McCarthy. McCarthy looked way better than I thought he was going to last week. I thought that the Lions were going to have a little feast on him, but they didn't. He's 4,900. He did not get a price bump here. Lamar got a price decrease probably because he wasn't running very well.
Yeah, he did look a little hampered. I think, weird enough, I am kind of off McCarthy, even though he is less than 5K. I just think without that rushing touchdown, he had a pretty bad game, stat wise,
Mm-hmm.
fantasy wise. He looked good and was getting it done for the Vikings, but his ceiling, I don't know if he's reached 200 yards yet. So I can't really go back to him here. And then for Lamar Jackson, 6,800 does seem a little too cheap for Lamar. So I do want some exposure, and just say with the additional rest, I like that they played last Thursday, so he's had at least 10 days of rest to get that hamstring back and healthy. But he was pretty hobbled. He was not really scrambling around like he normally does against Miami.
No, he wasn't. I'm going to wait for Lamar to look better, especially with the Vikings just surprising me and being at home. Their defense was real and shut down the Lions last week. So I'm out there. Let's go to everybody else. Aaron Jones may be out, and will that mean more Jordan Mason?
It will, but it still doesn't make Jordan Mason a great play here against the Ravens. We saw them bottle up Achan, so I'm not
Yeah.
too interested in Jordan Mason here. You know, we always have the very talented wide receiver duo of Justin Jefferson and Addison, which I think you can pick your shot here, both at home. We know that Jefferson has been like the best home wide receiver ever in his career, so I do like him a little bit better with that boost.
I I have a problem at 7,900. I just don't think Justin Jefferson with JJ McCarthy at quarterback can hit 30 points.
Yeah. We
And
did
I
just talk
need
about how McCarthy hasn't gotten to 200 yards yet, so
yeah,
not a
he's
lot to go
gonna
around.
exactly. There's not a lot to go around. I don't mind going going a little Jordan Addison maybe at 5,400 to have some exposure to this game. He dropped 400 point or $400 and he's getting some targets, but I just don't love pretty much any part of this game.
I do really like Zay Flowers here. I think he has a good opportunity to shine against the Vikings defense. They like to sit in that zone coverage, that kind of cover three looks that Zay Flowers and Lamar have a really good connection on. Also, he's just kind of due for some touchdown regression. We saw that Mark Andrews caught two passes, both for touchdowns last week,
Yeah.
and he's been kind of robbed by like Bateman and Andrews once again this season. So I think he has a couple coming his way, and I like him in the spot.
I don't mind the Mark Andrews call. We saw Laporta have a good day against the Vikings last week, so I don't mind the Mark Andrews call. He's always going to be in play. He's 3,400. Did you ever think there'd be a day where we got Mark Andrews at 3,400?
Yeah, he is still what rate way too cheap for being the favorite of Lamar Jackson in the red zone. So even if he's only catching two, he could do it again, and that's what Andrews has made his career off of just high
Definitely.
touch.
And 3,400. I love Mark Andrews here. I'll stay away from Derrick Henry. I saw what they did to Gibbs. Montgomery had a little bit more success last weekend against the Vikings, but Gibbs was totally shut down. And I don't know that Derrick Henry keeps rolling. He had a good week against Dolphins, but it was the Dolphins.
Yeah, we are kind of circling that matchup. I don't think he'll have a lot of success here.
I don't think so either. Anyone else, or shall we move on?
No, that's about it.
All right. Arizona Cardinals at Seattle Seahawks. Seahawks are favored by 6.5. 45 is the over under. If this wasn't in Seattle, I would actually like this game a little bit more, but not in Seattle, not with the chance of rain. I'll just stay off of pretty much everybody, but particularly Jacoby Brissett and Sam Darnold.
Yeah, it is nice at least that Kyler got put on IR. There's no question on who the quarterback is going to be for the Cardinals. We don't have to speculate. But this game feels like a dud to me. I mean, this is just a divisional game with some weather component. And then I think both defenses are pretty good. And then we know Brissett shows up for a game or two. But besides that, there's a reason he's not a starting quarterback in the league.
Yeah, exactly. He'll show up for a game or two. This just isn't it. He looked good last week against the Cowboys.
If he could only play the Cowboys, I'd be very interested. But
Yeah. Well, let's move on. We're gonna skip both these quarterbacks. I don't think Sam Darnold's gonna have to do anything to make this interesting. And I mean, last week he did it. He had 4 touchdowns. He had a great week. At 5,800, he is definitely not a bad play. But like you said, the Cardinals' defense and the weather here could definitely play a factor. Moving on, the big news on the Seahawks side was they traded for Rashid Shaheed from the New Orleans Saints. How much does that eat in to Jackson Smith-Njigba? And we were just seeing Torrey Horton come up too.
yeah, I was a little bummed for Torrey Horton. He has that 2 touchdown game. He looks great. And then suddenly your team trades for another wide receiver.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit of a bummer for him to be a breakout here. We also still have Cooper Kupp. I mean, he missed last week. but he's going to eventually make his way back on the field. So there is kind of getting to be a lot of mouths to feed. We know that JSN is that clear number one. I think he's the only one that I'm interested in here. But he is an interesting pivot. If you avoid Puka in the game we talked about earlier,
Mm-hmm.
JSN is one of the few wide receivers that has the ceiling here. So something to notice, the weather in this game isn't too bad. It's something to monitor going in. Right now it's just sitting at like 10% precipitation chance is what I last saw. So if that kind of remains down, JSN's an interesting pivot with his ceiling.
Interesting. Yeah, I could see. I'm kind of curious how much we're going to see Shaheed. I think we get him involved in a couple plays this week. So it's kind of interesting to, you know, think about taking him. I think I'm out on all of the parts of Arizona. Marvin Harrison Jr. coming off of one of his better weeks, catching a touchdown and just under 100 yards last week with Jacoby Brissett at quarterback. But again, Dallas defense. This isn't the Seahawks are not Dallas. He took a price hit, but I don't think this is going to be his week. And maybe we could go back to Trey McBride, but it's so hard going to Trey McBride at 6,000 when we just talked about Mark Andrews at 3,400. It's like, and there are two matchups. I think I'd rather just have Mark Andrews.
Yeah, I completely agree. And maybe if Bowers on this slate was on this slate, then I'd be interested at a pay up option. But McBride doesn't really sell me in this matchup for spending that
Yeah.
much at a tight end. Marvin Harrison, we should see that those targets kind of continue with Brissett. I think that Brissett's going to be a lot better for the connection between him and Harrison than Kyler was. But it all kind of comes down to matchup. You can do a lot worse where he didn't get the price bump that his game would have warranted. I mean, 7 for 96 and a touchdown. Normally
Yeah.
we'd see a pretty dramatic price change, but because it was Monday night, he's still sitting there at 5,300. I just don't like
Right.
this matchup in general. I've kind of been off this game and kind of been choosing to avoid it at all costs.
I think so too. And I'm staying away from the running backs. Walker and Charbonnet are in that true share again. So I'm not going to pick which one it's going to be this week. And then the whole Cardinals backfield's just a mess. Let's move on to the New Orleans Saints at the Carolina Panthers. Carolina's favored by 5.5. Over under is 40. Both of these quarterbacks had really bad weeks against good teams, and now they get to play each other. How did they manage to beat Green Bay in Green Bay? And Bryce Young is worth less than 4 fantasy points.
Yeah. And Canales had a good game plan. I mean, we've watched the Packers let other teams hang around. The Packers are very content with slowing the game down, and that's kind of what the Panthers played into is they were also slowing it down. They were heavily efficient with Rico Dowdle on the ground, but just basically not passing at all, and killed it close the entire game and set themselves up to win it at the end. So it was a good game plan. I think here against New Orleans, we could actually have some fun and maybe they pick it up a little bit more against a high pace of play Saints team.
Well, I feel like the Saints tried to slow it down last week with Tyler Shuck coming in. They didn't pass it nearly as much as they had been passing, even though they were down in that game against the Rams. So he only had 24 pass attempts. It was definitely not the same pace that we had seen previously. And then Kamara only rushed 6 times as well. So it seemed like we were seeing a slower New Orleans team. Now they've also shipped off Rashid Shaheed. I'm off on both of these quarterbacks. We can probably just move on to everybody else because, last week they scored 10 and 4 points. Together they weren't enough to warrant any DFS lineups.
I am
Uh,
interested in Young here. We've seen the Saints get beat through the air, and they're actually pretty good against the run. So if they aren't able to get that success on the ground with Rico, then I like Young. I think they'll still find ways to get it done, and he has had success against this defense. I think that pace of play, if they speed it up, and both of these teams kind of see their opportunity to get their young quarterbacks going, and maybe we get a much more competitive game here than we think.
Maybe. I still like Rico Dowdle. I like knowing which running back is going to be carrying the ball. And Dave Canales told us last week, he told Green Bay, we're going down to one running back. We're not sharing this ball anymore. And that's exactly what they did. And they had a lot of success doing it. I don't think we're going to see Hubbard sharing anymore until they get in trouble. So I'm perfectly fine going back to Rico Dowdle at 6,300 and a running back that I know they're going to go to 20 times at least in a game.
He's looked so good. Just as the lead back when he's getting that workload, he's always in play, especially against a game that they're at home, they're favored in.
Yeah, so I think they try to limit Bryce Young's passing. That takes me off of all of the wide receivers who the Panthers have. And then we're kind of left guessing Rashid Shaheed had 9 targets last week in their loss to the Rams. Where are all of his targets going to go to? Are they all going to go to Olave? Olave was down last week, but I feel like we saw a lot of them go to Juwan Johnson, their tight end, instead. He had 4. So is he going to get more work? Is it going to be just Johnson and Olave?
It is in the future. And in this matchup in particular, I like Johnson better than Olave. You can target tight ends against Carolina. You have been for a couple of years now. And just with really limited passing options besides Johnson Olave, I like going to him here.
Okay. We've got a long list of running backs and tight ends. The wide receivers are feeling a little bit thin right now, a lot of injuries, and I like knowing somebody's going to get the ball.
On the other side of the ball, I'm interested in McMillan, where he didn't really do much. I mean, it always just kind of is going to come down to how many yards does Bryce Young throw, because we know he's going to get the vast majority of them, and he is going to be the clear number one target for the Panthers. But when Bryce Young only throws for 100 yards, he's not going to have a good day. So if Bryce Young actually is a good play, then it feels like McMillan is a must stack with kind of how that passing game operates right now.
Nope. I feel like they're just going to run Dowdle, and that's it. That's the plan. And not let Bryce Young throw over 20 times.
The
That's
the Panthers in general have been kind of a fun team where they've won 4 of their last 5. I feel like this team relies on confidence too. And as far as like their offense goes, we know they're better at home, and I feel like confidence is just key. This team was kind of beat in the dirt the past couple seasons, so being able to actually have a winning record now, I think we actually might start seeing the fantasy value catch up. Besides Rico.
okay. We'll see. Let's move on to Jacksonville Jaguars at the Houston Texans. Texans favored by 1. Over under is 38. Texans are without CJ Stroud, who is going to be out with a concussion, and this is another gross division game.
Yeah, this game feels awful. Both defenses are in play here, and these offenses are just so banged up. We're going to watch Davis Mills behind one of the worst offensive lines in football play Trevor Lawrence without his wide receivers. I don't think I'll tune in for any of this game, really, and this game might not have an offensive touchdown in it.
Yeah, it could be crazy. I'm off on both Mills and Lawrence this week. Any bright spot on this team?
No.
I do love Dalton Schultz. I think when it gets difficult and you've got to get the ball out of your hands quickly, you go to your tight end, which he did last week against the Broncos defense, and he saw 8 targets. He had 77 yards, didn't have a touchdown. But I do, for that reason, love Dalton Schultz here at 3,600. I don't mind him.
I guess
still
Nico.
got Mark Andrews.
Nico's interesting too because we know Mills peppers Nico when he's in the game. Even just in the short amount of time, I mean, Nico got up to 11 targets, and Nico is one of those wide receivers that can take any ball to the house. Yep. So as far as we're in a slate with limited wide receiver options, Nico is an interesting pivot.
I think so too. So those are the only 2 bright spots that I've got in this game. I'll stay away from all of Jacksonville because that Houston defense is scary good.
It is I think the only name you can really throw out there is Parker Washington because he's 4,700, and with a banged up Brian Thomas Jr. and no Travis Hunter, he should be in that slot role. He saw 9 targets last week, so at least you're getting a cheap play, 4,700. You're not relying on him for much.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to our final game. Cleveland Browns at the New York Jets. Jets are favored by 2, over-unders 36.5. Both these teams are coming off their bye. Jets were clearly looking towards the future this week after trading Sauce Gardner and Quinnen Williams.
They were. So it'll be interesting what that defense actually looks like coming into this week without probably their two best defensive players. And they already weren't good to begin with. My only question here is there anything happening at this Cleveland side to take advantage of it?
Yeah, can we is Dylan Gabriel startable at 4400? Can he get to 20 points? Is there like any vision where he can get there? I'm not loving it, but again, we're going on the running backs. I like Quinshon Judkins, who should be back this week, but I'm not loving Dylan Gabriel. He's just not my quarterback, and that it might just come down to it's no fun to root for him.
Yeah, 4,400 is kind of interesting. I mean, that's cheaper than like Mariota. So against a banged up Jets defense, but I just like the other options here. And it's like, who are you stacking them with? I feel like you'd probably have to be like stacking them with one of the tight ends. Jerry Jeudy has done nothing, even though
Yeah.
he's been getting a lot of target.
Maybe this is his week.
I was very interested where Judkins was a little banged up before the bye. If Judkins was hurt here, I wanted to bring up the passing attack, but I think with the healthy Judkins, that's their offense, and
Yeah.
they should be able to run the ball.
I think so too. Is Cedric Tillman coming back?
He is, but I believe he's on IR right now.
Okay,
And I
so
don't think
he's not
they've
back yet. Got it. Any interest on the Jets?
No. I mean, it's just basically Garrett Wilson and Brees Hall, but this Cleveland defense is a pretty great defense still, too. So I am not too interested. Also, correction on Cedric Tillman. He is returning. It was a hamstring injury, so he should be out
Okay.
there. But I don't think that really helps any clarity for the pass catching options. It just adds another mouth for Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah. And Harold Fanning at 4,200 is pricey when you look at Dalton Schultz and Mark Andrews both sitting, 3,400 or less. I'm not
Especially
paying
with
more for
Njoku
Fanning.
out there, too.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. I didn't realize he was back too.
Mm-hmm.
All right, we'll stay away from that game.
I
Let's
am-
move on.
I
Go
was
ahead.
just going to say, I'm amazed that the Jets are favored in this matchup. It does not feel like they should be favored at all.
No.
Even at home, I don't think they're going to be able to do much against the Cleveland front. And I think Cleveland will find some success against the Jets.
This is crazy. Well, let's move on to our lineups. What are you going with?
All right. So the lineup that I am going with is Jackson Dart, stack. I just want that high over under. Both those defenses have been kind of pushed around. I want to target the Bears and Giants defenses. And they've been kind of fun on offense. They've been surprisingly fun. So I want to go Jackson Dart and then Darius Slayton as my stack. I just think if one of those connects, he is set up for a great game at 4,300. Then I'm going back to Rome Odunze. I think the squeaky wheel gets the grease, and Rome Odunze at 6K is a fun pivot option for a player that I believe in his talent. For my running backs, I want Jahmyr Gibbs and going back to him, and then Rico Dowdle in a matchup that they're favored against the Saints. Pairing with Rico, I think that game should be a little bit more exciting than the over-under, and I like Juwan Johnson at 3,700, just with the amount of targets he should see by Shuck. For my wide receivers, I have a couple of them paired in the same game. I'm finishing the lineup off with Puka Nacua and Jawan Jennings. I just like that stack. It's been kind of popping up more and more as I've been building lineups. And then finishing off with the Jags defense against Davis Mills and a really bad offensive line.
All right, hopefully that's gonna happen this week. My lineup, I'm going to that Bucks Patriots game that you're not a fan of. I'm going Drake May again this week. Drake May and Demario Douglas, and then on the other side, we're gonna put in Emeka Ibuka and just hope that we get some fireworks here. I'm gonna stay away from Bucky Irving though until I get a week to feel more how that share is gonna go with Rashad White and what that backfield's gonna look like. I'm just gonna go on the passing side of this game. So who am I going with at a running backs? I'm going with 3 big running backs. So we're going to go with Jahmyr Gibbs, Devon Achane, and Rico Dowdle. I got all 3 of them in here. So Rico Dowdle's in my flex spot. For my wide receivers, we already had Emeka Ibuka and Demario Douglas. So I'm going to finish it out with Jamison Williams in that the Lions game, the Lions-Washington game. I think they're still trying to integrate him more into that offense, and the Commanders could be the spot to do that in. And then my tight end, I went with Dalton Schultz. As we talked through this, I may go back and stick Mark Andrews in there instead of Dalton Schultz, but they're basically priced the same, so you can definitely do that. And then I didn't have a whole lot of money to spend on my defense, so I'm kind of hoping that the Vikings defense can pull through again against the Ravens and surprise some people at least.
Yeah, at least they get a lot of pressures, which gets some sacks, and even
Yep.
if they get scored on, they can get some points.
And they're at home. So I don't mind them at all at 2300. I think they're kind of the bargain defense that is in the slate at 2300, particularly because they are at home. They were probably priced even less last week against the Lions, and they had a good week.
Yeah, I do like the pay up options. It feels like as I was building the lineups, it's a very star and scrub kind of build where you're going to have those very expensive options where with a limited slate, you need access to that high ceiling. My fun, like, kind of pivot lineup was actually a Carolina stack, but basically to afford the stars on the slate of Achan, Gibbs, and Puka Nakua,
Yeah,
and then tying in like a Slayton and Kincaid to round it out.
exactly. All right, that's all for our Week 10 main slate. Hope you enjoyed the game review. Get up early for the Colts at the Falcons in Berlin. Hit subscribe and leave us a comment with your favorite plays of the week. See you next week.